Everyone who came to visit me asked why I have this second hole in the wall, but I just haven't finished the hallway yet, which is what I'm going to do now. What a mess. Time to clean up. Instead of a portable aluminum ladder, I built a beautiful wooden one, which turned out to be quite convenient despite the window steps. And the automatic lighting for each step added both practicality and aesthetics. Now it's time to improve the space under the stairs. I bought dry, precisely calibrated timber with beveled edges and used a miter saw to cut it into the necessary pieces for assembling the frame. I screwed the timber pieces into separate panels on the floor with regular screws, so I could assemble the partition frame and close the hole in the wall. Every square meter of the house costs a lot of money, and the staircase takes up that precious space. But when I was designing, I specifically arranged everything so that the space under the stairs could be used. For example, the refrigerator can be placed under the stairs to save kitchen space. From the kitchen side, it simply looks like a refrigerator door, which also proved very convenient. The refrigerator stood perfectly well on its own, but another task in the house was good soundproofing of the rooms. That's why it was planned for all the rooms to be separated from each other by 2 doors. So I also wanted to enclose the refrigerator niche with good soundproofing. I cut strips of thick 8mm bitumen felt padding and used a furniture stapler to attach the strips to the frame where it meets the floor and the wall. Next, The house partitions are D500 aerated concrete blocks with thick plaster, so you can screw in self-tapping screws without wall plugs. The frame is fixed, and I brought in the remnants of former luxury in the form of Volmov airstop panels. These are gypsum boards with the core reinforced by special threads. The main distinguishing feature of these panels is how strongly they resist catching fire. I tested regular drywall and it holds back fire for literally just a few minutes, if not seconds, but special fire-resistant panels can withstand it for tens of minutes. Honestly, they're not needed here. I'm just mentioning them for information, since they can be helpful elsewhere. I had these scraps lying around, so I didn't need to buy drywall. I'll explain the downside of these fire-resistant panels later. Since someone criticized me in the comments, I'll specifically point out that I use specialized screws for everything. The ones that say drywall wood on the package. Yes, on camera they look like the cheapest black screws, but that's actually not the case. The special ones at least have a different thread for better grip in loose gypsum. The internal filling of the frame required some brain work, because I really didn't want to mess around with mineral wool in a finished living space, so I wouldn't have to pick wool out of pots and pans later. I figured that the best solution would be to use the same drywall scraps and place them inside the frame. That way I don't have to buy anything extra and I won't have to breathe in any wool. Sound insulation should improve since drywall is denser. Details also matter. Don't leave any empty spaces inside the partitions, otherwise you'll get multiple reflections of the sound wave, which will only make the noise worse. That's the infamous drum effect. I screwed in a couple more layers of gypsum boards inside and closed everything from the outside so it's flush with the wall. The next task is to make the cover. The difficulty was that I initially messed up the dimensions of the niche and the stairs, so I had to improvise on the spot. I built a mini version of the frame. I screwed the same boards onto the back as I did on everything else. I also filled the inner space for sound insulation with regular drywall. I fixed this artistic improvisation with screws both to the stairs and to all sides of the walls. I specifically chose the height so that I could make an improvised lid. The niche has 4 drywall layers, so the lid also needs 4 layers to prevent noise from passing through a weak spot. I cut grooves for the stair stringer with a reciprocating saw, and because of the staircase's slope, each next piece needed a different offset, but it all worked out with minimal gaps. To make the front part of the niche in the kitchen look at least somewhat decent for now, I took a leftover piece of an AGT cabinet front and cut out a rectangle of the required size. Using a mix of Tremco tape and sealant, I attached the rectangle to the frame without having to ruin the front side with screw holes. The sealant takes quite a long time to dry, and Tremco tape by itself isn't strong enough to last for a couple of decades of use. In my plan, the tape will hold the panel until the sealant dries. That way, I'll get a super strong fixation. The base is ready, now I can move on to aesthetics and make it look nice. First of all, I applied a deep penetrating primer to both sides of the niche. I covered the floor with cardboard and taped the walls to avoid making a mess. The next day, after the primer dried, I mixed gypsum plaster and started plastering all the outer and inner corners. I applied plaster to the corner with a spatula, slightly overlapping onto the surface. I ran out of metal corner beads, and since the niche isn't a critical area, I decided to experiment. I shaped the corners using perforated tape for drywall joint finishing, since I still had a lot of it left. I placed the pre-bent tape on the corners and ran a clean spatula over it so that plaster would squeeze out of each hole. Then I covered it with an additional thin layer of plaster on top. Of course, it's better to use metal corners on outside edges, but I managed to get by with paper tape. I let the corners dry for a few days and then used a spatula to scrape off any marks, bumps, and anything sticking out from the surface. Then I primed it again and waited another day for it to dry. For the final preparation of the surface before wallpapering, I used superfine finishing putty. It would have been better to use LR putty, but I ran out on the second floor and only had half a bucket of superfine putty left. So the whole niche was done kind of on a leftover basis. I made it out of what I had. I had to apply several layers of superfine putty, and for academic purposes, I intentionally left various defects on the surface to understand where the line is for unevenness that wallpaper won't forgive. I left the defects where they wouldn't be visible, and I thoroughly sanded the visible parts with a sanding block and 120 grit sandpaper. I used a light to spot defects and removed them by sanding. I'll try not to do this again in a living space, because in the hallway everything turned out like this. After sanding as usual, everything needs to be primed again, and while the primer is drying, some of the furniture arrived. After assembling the furniture, there's a whole pile of sawdust left, and to keep it from spreading all over the floor, I need to vacuum thoroughly. My new cordless vacuum cleaner, Derma T30V Combo, will help me with this. This is an upright cordless vacuum cleaner with a suction power of 23 kPa, which is the same as a construction vacuum cleaner, so it effectively picks up not only dust but also larger debris. And with the help of the front green lamp, dust won't escape your attention even in dark corners. Besides the main brush, the set also includes a crevice nozzle, which can also be used as a brush. And in the combo package, there are also 2 extra filters and a brush for cleaning upholstered furniture, which will help get rid of even dust mites. The improved design of the cyclonic air duct means you no longer have to untangle clumps of hair after cleaning, and overall, emptying the dust container is very easy with the press of a single button without having to get your hands dirty. The absence of that typical vacuum cleaner smell in the air indicates truly effective air filtration. The Derma holds a charge up to 40%, minutes, and that's enough to vacuum both floors of my house more than once. The versatility of the vacuum cleaner allows you to take it out of the house, for example, to vacuum your car. I'm very satisfied with the cleaning, and you can get the same helper through the link in the description. Even the kitty approves, and I'm going back to work. And the wallpaper at my place was put up by Kushka Kushkodam, and I'm very grateful to him for that. He did it 9 out of 10. Before that, the most I had done was fix a small piece of wall when I moved the valve for precise ventilation, and back then I swore I'd never put up wallpaper in my life. It's true. Never say never. You can't hire someone just to hang a few square meters of wallpaper, so I put up wallpaper for the first time myself. I took leftover pieces of wallpaper rolls from the main wallpapering in the house, measured the approximate size of the needed panels with a tape measure, and cut out 2 panels with scissors for the job. I used a spade drill bit as a mini whisk to mix leftover wallpaper glue, then brushed it on the wall. Kushka Kushkodam also applied glue directly to the wallpaper panels. The instructions say to apply glue only to the wall. If you put glue on poor quality wallpaper, yes, you can just ruin everything. I use quality Belgian washable wallpaper, and it's easier to adjust if you apply glue to both the wall and wallpaper. However, it's difficult to do alone, so I only applied glue to the wall. I stuck a piece of wallpaper and started smoothing it out with a special wallpaper spatula. At first it all looked terrible, and there's a reason I swore off hanging wallpaper. After a few minutes the wrinkles faded and bubbles decreased. Simply sticking wallpaper to the wall isn't really that hard. The real magic is making the seams so that you can't see them at all. I watched Kushka Kushkodam and tried to repeat the trick of cutting the wallpaper with a knife along the spatula. Here you need to do everything very evenly and carefully, without lifting the knife and cutting through both sheets of wallpaper. Next, we remove the excess strips, additionally apply glue to the joint to make sure it doesn't come off over time, and use a wallpaper spatula to join them together. Once I used too much glue and got tired of trying to push bubbles out from under the wallpaper. As it turned out, it wasn't air, but excess glue, which I removed with pre-prepared wet wipes. In the end, it turned out about 50-50. Some seams are visible and some look really good. For the first time it's fine and I can start assembling the rest of the furniture. It turned out pretty well, as if it was planned that way, even though it was actually pure improvisation. The most important thing is that it turned out to be very functional, because sometimes up to 10 people gather in the house and now everyone has a place to take off their shoes, get changed and hang their clothes. And after turning 30 you start to appreciate that there are now 3 whole places in the hallway where you can sit down to take off your shoes. There won't be any prices in this video because the niche was made from leftover pieces from the furniture from the hallway. As for the wardrobe, a huge thank you once again to the Leningrad Furniture Factory because it was custom made. This thing here and everything else you see here is from marketplaces. This is around 2,000, this one is around 3,000, and this thing is around 4,000. This one and this one are fine, but as for this shoe cabinet, it should be pissed on and burned. It looks fine in the picture, but when you start touching it and actually using it, when you open it, it does this. This can be fixed if you put a little bit of shoes in there, then it won't fall by itself anymore. But there's another problem, because if you open and close it about 10 times, this whole damn drawer starts to fall out. It has this little thing that holds it, but if you open it a couple of times, the drawer just falls to the floor. This is one of those cases when you have to modify store-bought furniture with a file just to make it work properly. I'm thinking maybe I should either screw that part in with some screws or glue it on. I'll have to come up with something so it doesn't fall out. There was also an interesting challenge of how to actually hang this on the wall, because attaching something to drywall is a really important issue that you don't pay attention to until you face it in real life. I went around all our village stores and gathered all the fasteners they had by trial and error. As a result of my experiments, I found that these metal anchors are just awesome. Especially the longer ones, so they can grab several layers of drywall, and that way you get quite a few kilograms on a single mounting point. There are plastic anchors that, according to official data, also hold well, but in practice these plastic anchors either break, don't screw in, or heat up and melt from the rotation. They're just a real hassle to work with. In my opinion, metal ones are much better for this purpose. There's nothing better. And that's also one of the reasons why it's worth using 2 layers of drywall when you're building framed partition walls. In my opinion, the space under the stairs is used to its maximum potential, and I liked how it turned out with the refrigerator. You can't hear it at all. Now you don't have to close the bedroom door to avoid hearing the refrigerator, and you can put something up there and hang things here, and the shelf here works well too, basically. And of course, if there was more money, you could have something custom made there too, with some pull-out drawers or something to make it more convenient. But for a small amount of money, with a bit of handiwork, you can make a pretty decent solution. The robot did a great job covering up all the stuff that's lying under the stairs. I've got all sorts of stuff lying around there. Batteries, chargers, things like that, which I rarely use. Just some junk. And it turned out basically pretty aesthetic. Plus, while I'm talking about the hallway, I want to draw special attention to it since it's often the case. I often come across this when you enter a house even worth 20 million, and from the very first step inside, you start to suffer. Because for some reason, people really want to save money on the hallway and make them 4 or 5 square meters. When they build a wall right here and make a recess about 600 millimeters deep so they can put a wardrobe with sliding doors in there. But when all of this gets closed off, all the partitions, then you come into the house. If more than one person comes in, then you end up walking like this, in this little hallway, and you can't really take your coat off comfortably. Because here I can have 4 people in winter clothes taking off their coats and shoes. Everything is great here. The area of the entryway is 6.62, not counting the staircase. With the staircase, it's almost 10 square meters here. And this is a proper entryway where you feel like a human being, where you don't have to enter the house one at a time. And when designing the house, I lay out the blocks in AutoCAD. I had to loosen my purse strings more than once to expand the house by 1 more block, specifically to increase the size of the entryway. Just in case, let me remind you that all the information about the house project is in the pinned comment. The only compromise solution I managed to come up with here is that my dirty and clean zones overlap. For example, when you go up to the 2nd floor, or if you want to go to the bathroom. But this issue can be solved either by a robot vacuum cleaner, which you can just press with your foot on one button. It's programmed to clean right here, exactly where people walk. Not everyone has a robot though. Plus, having a robot still doesn't mean you don't need a handheld vacuum cleaner. And in the hallway there's this vertical cordless one. My wife really liked this type of vacuum cleaner. She says she doesn't want to use the regular one with all those cords anymore. She says it's awesome, because you just press a button and in 3 seconds it's done. And everything that gets tracked into the hallway is clean. The cool thing about these fireproof panels is that I already had a task to avoid using insulation on the 1st floor so it wouldn't create dust anywhere here. I stuffed in these panels. Fire stop in there, finished the work, took a shower, went to have dinner, and then something started happening to me. Something like that. I was walking around feeling weird. I looked at my hands. They were all red. Severe irritation. I was like, what? Do I have an allergy or something? Did I eat something wrong? I'm walking around thinking, trying to figure out what's causing it. Then the next day I went back there to finish the work, and the sun came out. When I was cutting the panel, I realized that the fibers that reinforce the core, there are some threads there like glass ones, and they break, and the effect from them is exactly the same as from fiberglass. It's really important to know this before you start working with them. Because later this fiberglass can come back to haunt you later. And I'll repeat, I used it simply because I had some scraps left over, but it's also something to consider when it comes to fires. Because at home, I have a lot of this stuff. I have this kind of lithium. I have lithium in my curtains. We have lithium in all sorts of phones. I never leave lithium charging unattended. so that I would plug something in to charge and leave the house. I never do that. The only bastard that does that in my house is this one. This is the robot vacuum cleaner that's sitting there charging. It has lithium inside and it's charging. I really hope that this is an expensive thing with all sorts of safety features. And when I leave the house for a couple of hours, I don't worry about it. If I go somewhere like to St. Petersburg for a couple of days, I have all of this connected through a smart socket. That includes the lighting on the stairs. I just say like, Alisa, I'm leaving. And she turns off everything that should be turned off when I'm not home. And when I come back, I tell Alisa I'm home. She turns everything back on, so that my lithium battery is never charging when I'm not home. While I was collecting the videos, I watched the footage from right after I moved in, when there were no doors in the house, no ceiling. There was a pile of all sorts of junk lying around. Everything looked so rough back then. The entryway was the last unfinished room on the first floor, and now it's become so cozy. From the moment I enter the house, it no longer feels like a construction site. I truly feel like I'm coming home. And I wish each of you to experience that feeling in life when you can truly come home. As for construction work on the first floor, all that's left is to install the baseboards, and then everything will be completely finished. The things that still need to be added are just a matter of going to the store, buying them, and installing them. No, there's no more work to be done. All the main work is left only on the second floor. I'll try to make a video about that as well. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. See you in the next video.